President Caslin, trustees, family, friends, and of course, the graduating class of 2020. I am honored to speak to you today, but saddened that it has to be in this way. I was all prepared to stand in front of you at my home away from home, the Colonial Life Arena. But this change was necessary and a sign of the times we find ourselves in. We are surely in uncertain times. These are the times we read about in history books from days long gone, a faraway time when technology was rudimentary and penicillin was the cure for all. Today, in an unfortunate way, we become history. We become the people who lived through a pandemic. Now your children will read about the pandemic of 2020 in their history books, and you'll be able to give them a first-hand account of what it was really like. You'll tell them stories of quarantine. You'll tell them about social distancing and the national controversies over mandatory face coverings. You'll tell them how for the first time in our country's history, not only doctors, but nurses, sanitation workers, grocery store clerks, truck drivers, and the always unsung teachers were our heroes. You'll be able to pinpoint with accuracy exactly when the pandemic occurred, your final year in college. You'll drudge up memories of milestones missed and will explain how all your classes and even your graduation was completed virtually. You'll share the start of 2020 and will recount it all, including your disappointments. And it's okay, we've all had them. My personal pandemic disappointments are admittedly a bit selfish. I was shopping in Asheville, North Carolina, when I saw the headline come over Twitter. It read, "The NCAA to cancel the women's and men's 2020 basketball tournaments." I stood motionless for a few seconds, attempting to take in the gravity of what those words meant. I scrolled my Twitter feed, hoping it was a hoax, only to find it confirmed over and over and over again. I said a few expletives in my head and took a seat on a nearby bench. I had to gather myself, although this was potentially the biggest year of my professional career as a coach. For me, my personal accomplishments paled in comparison to the year our team could have had. You have to understand, the team we had this season was a coach's dream. They were the perfect combination of veteran leadership and rookie energy. It was stacked with All-Americans who actually liked each other, shared the ball, had unbelievable chemistry, and an undeniable will to win. Coaches don't get this type of team very often. Maybe once in a career, twice if you're lucky. In my heart, I knew when it was all said and done, we would have brought back another national championship to Columbia. I knew it. So there I sat on a bench in Asheville, alone and grieving. My disappointment was more for our FAMs, our student body, the city of Columbia, my staff, and of course, our players. Our seniors, Tyesha Harris and Makia Herbert-Harrigan, who are both now playing in the WNBA, like most of you, were freshmen when we won our first national championship. I thought it only fitting for them, as well as all of you, to book in your college experience with another national championship. We were so close. I had the championship parade routed in my mind and the space in our trophy case all picked out. It hurt. A few days later, or maybe weeks, it's all a blur. I received the news that the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo will be postponed until 2021. In the same way, Twitter's the devil. I wasn't quite as disappointed in the Olympic postponement as I knew I would still get a chance to coach the Olympic team. All things considered, one year didn't feel so far away. Once the pain began to subside, I was able to be more thoughtful about what was actually happening in the world. And my disappointment turned to gratitude. I'm grateful that everyone I know and love is safe and well, and I sincerely hope the same is true for all of you. I'm grateful this pandemic gave us what many of us haven't had in a very long while: time. Under quarantine, we had time to get to know ourselves again. We had time to reflect on our lives and the lives of those of us, the people we love. We were able to spend real and uninterrupted quality time with people we typically take for granted, our family. We had the time to finally read that book that's been just sitting there and to catch up on those shows lying dormant on our DVRs. Oh, and Netflix. Netflix kept us entertained, informed, and gave us a needed reprieve from the anxiety that constant news updates ensured. In that moment of interrupted time, I learned something really important. I needed it. I needed to slow down, to sleep, permission not to burn the candle at both ends. I needed to disconnect from my devices and all the daily responsibility I carry for just a moment. I know many of you are anxious about leaving the structure of this fine institution for what seems like chaos and uncertainty of this world called our new normal. You may be worried about the unemployment numbers and whether or not you'll find that perfect job. After all, that's what you went to school for, right? Rest assured, it will happen. It may not happen as soon as you like, to the absolute dismay of your parents, but it will happen. You will get a job. You will start your life. You will accumulate things and take on all the responsibilities that come with those things. But for this moment, for this unusual, unfortunate, historical moment, take the time. Take the time to reconnect with those you love. Actually talk to people. When you have the inclination to text someone, call them instead. Turn off your devices and all those all-consuming video games and do something we used to do back in the day. Have face-to-face conversations, real conversations with meaning. This is the time to seek direction from those who know, who have done it, who have lived it, who are living it. This is the time to ask questions and to actually listen to the answer. So often, we allow the first opportunity we get to dictate our direction. You have the time to be thoughtful about your path, to really lay out your ultimate goals and the small objectives that lead to the fulfillment of those goals. You have the time to plan out your steps in an effort to mitigate missteps. This is also the perfect opportunity to think critically about who you are in this moment, space and time. Not only do we find ourselves in a global pandemic, but also in the midst of a social political movement, the likes of which we haven't seen in close to 50 years. Think about what's happening in this country and where you stand. We all heard about Breonna Taylor, and we're all witnesses to the murder of George Floyd. Watching him lifeless on the street under the pressure of another man's knee on his neck shook me to my core. I'm the youngest of 5 with 3 older brothers. Watching that footage, I was acutely aware of how easily that could have been one of my brothers. I was immobilized for a moment by the brutality and blatant disregard for human life. I couldn't find words, but feelings came easily. I was angry, but I had time to think. I wanted to do something with my platform, something significant, but was unsure of how to express my feelings in a broad and impactful way. I settled on penning an article for the Players Tribune. In the article, I talked about racial injustice, and I used my mother's childhood story to highlight the message. My parents were both born and raised in the Columbia area. So when I took this job, it was a homecoming of sorts for my mother, who moved from Philadelphia back to Columbia with me. My mother was about 13 years old when she left South Carolina under the most egregious of circumstances. As the story goes, one day, my grandmother asked my mother to go to the local butcher to get a particular cut of meat for dinner. When my mother arrived at the butcher, she waited in line patiently, then asked for the cut and the amount of meat she needed. The butcher, a white man, returned from the back with what my mother noticed was spoiled meat. With all the niceties she could muster at 13, she explained the meat was spoiled and asked the butcher for another cut. The butcher refused, called my mother a few choice names, and kicked her out of the shop. Never one to hold her tongue in the face of injustice. Even at the early age of 13, my mother responded boldly to his verbal attack with a few choice words of her own. When she returned home without the meat and told my grandmother what transpired, it took my grandmother all of 45 minutes to pack my mother's bags and to get her to the bus station with a one-way ticket to her sister in Philadelphia. My grandmother, she knew the butcher would not accept the sass of a black girl, and it was likely that he and a few of his friends would pay the family a visit under the shadows of darkness. My grandmother moved with deliberate intention, with the understanding that moving too slowly or doing nothing at all could cost my mother her life at worst, or lifelong memories of a night of torture at best. Time is a funny thing, isn't it? That was just 61 years ago. Although things have changed, many have remained the same. My status as a national championship coach, the fact that I have won gold medals for this country and have received numerous high honors for my community work, has not protected me from being profiled or treated unkindly because of the color of my skin. And for some reason, whenever this happens, I'm always taken aback that preconceived notions and conscious or unconscious biases based solely on the color of my skin can determine how I'm being treated, even before I utter a word. In my reactionary moments, which I have from time to time, because I'm human, I will call the person on their behavior. In more rational moments, I'll pray for them. It must be so difficult to harbor hatred for someone you don't even know. It must be inconveniencing to go out of your way to be intentionally unkind. I have always believed that hatred says more about the hater than the hated. And that which fuels hate is fear. There's a hypocrisy in fear. Fear can take the most seemingly kind and loving person and turn them into the most mean-spirited, ugly individual you'll ever meet. We've all seen it. My mother, with her Southern Christian roots, taught all of her children to be loving and kind, patient and charitable, to understand differences and rather fear them to embrace them. We were taught that God is the only judge and he works alone. Hate is learned, is taught, and is conquered only through love. Class of 2020, you are standing at history's door, and the only key that unlocks it is love. Think critically about how you love, who you love, what you love, and determine if it's enough to open the door to a new and kinder world. You are not only graduating at a historical moment in our country's history, but at an important time. You are the voices of a changing nation. You have the ability to direct how we move forward, for better or for worse. This is the greatest opportunity we have in modern history to deal with racism, not only here, but around the world. as what we do here generalizes to other nations. If we do nothing, not only can we not complain, but we are complicit in stagnating the forward movement of this country and nations worldwide. I hope to live in a just world where there are no inequalities, where we are truly all one under God. I hope to see a time when there's no food insecurity and no disparity, gaps in education, health, or economics. And although I love doing community service, I hope there's a time when my charity, which helps the underserved, is no longer needed. Because in such a great nation, we figured out how to have no underserved. I have always believed as a country, we're only as strong as our most vulnerable citizen. It's time for us to do better. The peaceful protests for racial injustice taking place around the world give me hope. Young people like yourselves are risking their health in a global pandemic to fight for the rights of their fellow Americans. The significance of the protests, as I see it every night on the evening news, rests on the fact that the majority of protesters on the front line are white, fighting for Black lives, and they are not backing down. It signals to me that this generation, your generation, has a collective acknowledgement of injustice and is ready to take up the fight for change, that you all want a more just nation, and you are willing to do whatever it takes to ensure it happens. Think about where you are today. Think about where you stand. You are the next political leader. Will you fight now to ensure that tomorrow and forever more Black Americans can walk, drive, or jog without the fear of being killed? And that disparity gaps in health, education, and economics cease to exist? You are the next corporate president. Will you fight now to ensure that in the future there are no discriminatory hiring practices and that anyone qualified has an equal opportunity for employment? I don't have a political agenda. I have a human agenda. We have got to find the humanity, the love for one another. We can no longer afford to come together as a country only for national sporting events or natural disasters. We have to take care of one another every day. And I think it starts now. I think it starts with you. Class of 2020, this is your moment, and the world is watching. Whether or not you meet this moment will determine the direction of this country. This is my challenge to you. Meet the moment. Meet the moment. You have the time. Think about how you will affect change and leave an indelible mark on our country and the world. And once you figured it out, pursue it with reckless abandon. And when you get tired because you found that job and the world is moving and you feel the heaviness of responsibility, just remember, you are a gamecock. We are bold, courageous, and we fight until the end. We never say die. Good luck, class of 2020. We're counting on you. Be safe. To God be the glory. Thank you.